Because I had posted so many videos talking about the Hunger Games, doing a literary analysis of the entire series, minus Sunrise on the Reaping, I still have to do that one, and just occasionally posting videos digging into thoughts and theories and overanalyzing, I had the great fortune of connecting with other creators who also love to talk a lot about the Hunger Games, and was invited to join a Discord group where we just talk about the Hunger Games and our excitement of the upcoming movie and things like that. And recently, one of the other creators, Dove, talked about how she is starting to do research once again for her series that she's been posting mostly on YouTube, which I'll tag her down below, by the way, where she goes into the geography of the districts. And one of the patterns that she's been coming across is natural disasters and how that plays a role. And to me, that immediately sparked man versus nature. That was my first thought, which that is a very, that's a common theme, but it's a very important theme to not only Susan Collins, but the Romanticism era of writing, which the reason why it came to my mind initially is because I was just talking about it with the recent chapter I recorded for Wuthering Heights and the analysis I'm doing for this, which Wuthering Heights is a Romanticism era of writing, like a book from that era, which when I say Romanticism, I don't mean romantic love. I mean, it's a era of philosophy and literature where they look at humanity and human nature and use nature not only to talk about nature itself, but to use as symbolism and things. Like William Wordsworth's poem Lucy Gray, which inspired the character Lucy Gray, came from the Romanticism era of writing. It was a response to the Enlightenment era, which the Enlightenment were the philosophers that founded pretty much the ideas that revolutions and our governments were built off of. The United States government was built off those philosophies, but they also saw the worst in humanity coming out of these revolutions. If you want to know more about those two eras of philosophy, I have plenty of videos on my own YouTube between the Hunger Games and Jane Austen, and how those philosophies influenced both those books and many other books, even Wuthering Heights, as I said. But getting back to man versus nature, one of the things that I talked about in Wuthering Heights is because of our narrator at the time comes from society, comes from London society, and he crosses the moors in a snowstorm, and the other characters think he's an idiot, but to him, he doesn't respect nature, because to him, he's coming from a society that thinks that man can control nature. The Enlightenment believed that they could find and know everything. That they believed in the scientific, revolution, that they had the capability of knowing everything, but the Romanticism came out and we're trying to prove that that's impossible. You're Frankenstein coming into the Romantic movement. We're trying to show that man cannot play God, that man cannot control nature. And that's a lot of the themes in Romanticism writing. And it's a theme we're seeing in The Hunger Games. Man cannot control nature. Nature will always win out. Same with natural disasters. And the reason why Dove's comment made me think of this also was that The Hunger Games, the way it's set up perfectly reflects that. In the beginning of our societies were built around nature, working coinciding and working with nature. We built our towns where the natural world was most fruitful to us, where we could easily have access and work with it to sustain it. But eventually man got too arrogant and thought we can control it and expand. And our arrogance led to problems such as the Great Dust Bowl of the 1930s, because then we became a single crop rotation, because we're well, we'll just transport this, and we'll do factory kind of style of just one product. And that is what the districts is set up like. That's what Snow and Dr. Gall really leaned into, that the districts have one product that they lean into. And then they bring it into the capital, where the capital is not self-sufficient. They are dependent on the districts to sustain them. We saw with Snow talking about how during that war, the revolution that he had lived through, how when they had a blockade, they could not sustain themselves. They were turning towards, cannibalism. And it's fascinating that Snow didn't learn from that mistakes. He leaned in more, because to him and Dr. Gall, they thought that they could know and control everything. The arrogance of man. And then you see characters like Hamish and Katniss and even Peeta throughout the course of their books, their respect, and Lucy too, their respect in coinciding and working with nature. The rightful fear of nature, that nature can win out. But I also think it's fascinating that we don't see too much of how natural disasters could play a role in things in districts, but like also we aren't given a whole lot of time of exploring the world besides like the Hunger Games. So I think if we had more time, we can probably see how the natural world does affect. But I'm rambling, but like for me, it's just absolutely fascinating the theme of man versus nature that is so prevalent in the Hunger Games, to the point that like Snow said in his book that he was more afraid of the woods behind him than the crowd coming for the hanging tree in front of him. And you see that reflected in the 50th Hunger Games, that he is trying to show the public that you need to turn to the capital to help sustain you. We will keep you safe, because look how dangerous nature is with the 50th Hunger Game, every aspect of the natural world being toxic and dangerous. The only safe items were those in the cornucopia provided by the capital. It's all propaganda, but also the arrogance of man, because that is not the truth. Yes, nature can be dangerous, but if you have the right amount of respect for it and work with it, if you're a part of its system instead of trying to control the system, there's a balance to it. So obviously there's a whole lot of themes that Susan Collins brings up, but to me, I love the man versus nature theme, and I dig into that a lot because that is what fascinates me. And to me, it seems like Susan Collins very much is a romantic like era kind of style of writing, that she does use a lot of symbolism of nature. She looks at the same kind of themes that they looked at and discussions that they had. So it's fascinating to see that. And again, I'm like I said, I'm rambling, but I love that, like just that little tidbit that we had in our Discord just sent me down a rabbit hole of this theme, and once again proving how brilliant Susan Collins is, that like you can just dig into this for hours on like the niche little things. But like I said, I love Susan Collins' views of nature, and I like highly encourage you, if you go back to reread the series, really look at it, and look at like anytime she brings up like any plant, any weather, anything like that, look up the symbolism of it, because there is meaning behind it more often than not. And I bring it up a lot in my literary analysis series. You can probably find it buried here on TikTok. I don't have the playlist settings, sadly, but I also on my YT have all those videos posted in a playlist form if you do want to watch them too. But this is like, I love being able to kind of bounce things off of other creators, and like together we like just keep digging further, because we each bring something different to the table. And that's so much fun about this like group in this Discord, is that we each bring something niche to the table, and it unlocks something else for one another. So thank you for sticking around this long if you have to listen me ramble about this. But yeah, I would love to hear what your thoughts and opinions about the Hunger Games and the themes that Susan Collins talks about, and man versus nature and all those kind of things. And I really look forward to seeing what Dove does next with her series that she's been doing, because it has been absolutely fascinating.